is 103.
But that includes,
$103, yeah.
what does it include? It's not just a
So,
book.
so it's not a physical book and at all. They will not be printing a single copy. It is the way the textbooks are going nowadays. They're all online. They're all interactive online ebooks, and that means they have media items embedded in them. They have links to things. They have all kinds of other interactive things other than just text on paper, right? And images, of course. So this is the new way that almost all textbooks are trying to go, and the publishers and the authors love it. Why? Because if you ever made a book that went into print and it sold, okay, great. But then there's these things called used bookstores that when college kids are done with their book, they usually sell it back to a used bookstore who then sells it again, but the author never sees any money on that. So the book can be handed out forever and ever and ever. And the author only gets paid and the publisher only gets paid on the first time. So that's one reason. The other reason is it's really easy to make multiple editions. Your first edition, if you need to make changes, it's all electronic. It's really easy. Need to update a link? Easy. Takes seconds instead of having to go reprint a whole, thousands of books or however many copies you're printing. And it's also easier so that like you don't overprint books either, right? So you're not wasting money. And I think it's really a win-win situation for the publisher, the author, and the consumer, because the consumer gets this more interactive experience. Yes. Consumer gets a more interactive process, right? And the author and publishers get to track their money better. And usually now, here's the kicker though. This is the one that kind of bothers me, but I don't really have control. If one of my students gets a textbook, they only have it for a year and then it's gone. So they'll pay the money. It's only like renting it. They don't have permanent access to it.
So it's not permanent access. You can't get permanent access if you buy the book.
If you buy the book, you only get about a year, they said. They said really it's only for the semester, but they don't do a purge until after about a year or so after you've purchased it. Wow. So that's the kicker. That's the one that kind of bothers me, but that's what everyone's doing now. And it's a way to basically control the money.
Also, it's a way to upgrade the material because things are going to go out of date unless on media links.
Yep.
This is the way.
Yeah. So like second edition can be done in a couple days instead of, another year. Right.
Got it. And please put on your cameras, mute your speakers and your microphones until we are asking you to unmute. I'm going to start the recording and turn this over to you. Okay. We're already recording right now. Change it to you. Please see.
All right. Okay, session 2. Very exciting stuff. Now we've kind of got a good foundation of like some of those elements, and the ones we didn't really get to as well are orchestration and style, genre, and the music theory. And as I've been telling some of you who have been in lessons with me, when I am presented with the project to work on, and I'm given the scene or whatever, the very first thing I think about is orchestration and style, genre. The pacing, all those other things, those come secondary. Those come after I've got my main ideas. My first idea is, what style or genre do I want to use? And then what sounds, instruments, whatever, do I want to create that sound with, right? What do I want to employ? And then you start with like, okay, now melody, and I'm going to write it for this. But those are my first thoughts. Is like, man, do I want to use like synth here? Do I want to use acoustic? Yeah.
Casey, let me see if I can unmute myself so I can be on this thing.
I use a different approach.
Okay.
And I think it's completely different from you, but
Yeah.
I can totally understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think what I do the analysis, I do the pacing, I figure out what the timings are roughly, and then the idea of how it goes from one thing to the next. So the contour, the shape of how we perceive time. So it's a completely different approach than you. And I do think very quickly when I do that analysis, it answers the question, what's the orchestra going to be? What genre is it going to be? How fast are the cuts? It's going to tell me a lot about the tempo. So if I do, for me, it's helpful to atomize it down into small little atoms going on for however long the video is. Then I start grouping them together, saying, oh, this is a section, but it's really, it's almost simultaneously happening. Orchestration, genre, what music language am I going to be using?
Yeah.
What's the diegetic stuff?
Oh, that's really what happens, you know, like if we're talking about like, I'm talking about like orchestration style genre, that's in like the first minute.
Mhm.
But ultimately, we're thinking about all seven the whole time too, right? It's just sometimes we sort of initially jump to one thing or the other as composers, right? And so, yeah, you're really thinking, I tend to ultimately think about all seven aspects at the same time, simultaneously. Like, okay, pacing, good instrument for that pacing, or here's an instrument, what's a good pacing for that instrument, you know, or like, and how would it work with the scene? Does it work with a violin? Is a violin agile enough to do this? Well, of course it is. But is a tuba agile enough to do this? No, you know, there's so many things to consider like that. But and then style genre, I think ultimately is the number one thing I do think of first, though, is like, okay, I'm watching the scene. I'm thinking about, okay, this is kind of a light romantic comedy. I've kind of deduced that from watching it, maybe reading the script, talking to the director, figuring out what is the thing that I'm going to be scoring before I even think about music. Like, what is this movie? What is happening in the scene? How do I analyze the drama? Man, I'm reading this on the text, and to me, it sounds like it got serious all of a sudden. But it's kind of hard to tell. And a lot of that comes with, for like I told you, I've been composing for theater. When you compose for theater, you literally go off of a script. You have nothing else to work with. When you compose for film, you're given the scene. You're given the length. It's all done. You get all this time to like break it down and trial and error with the music. With a film, with a theater, or just going off a script, because sometimes the film you'll only get the script too. You have to be able to deduce what's going on, what's the energy, what's the drama level, what's the comedy level, what's the character of what's happening right now. Okay. And then your music has to support it, right? And sometimes even drive it, right? Sometimes the words on the page aren't enough. Sometimes the acting on the screen isn't enough. The music needs to drive this. Man, how many, if you've ever watched oh God, try to find a clip of Lord of the Rings or Star Wars where the music's been removed. My favorite is the throne room. In Star Wars, the throne room in Star Wars.
Oh, Star Wars. Sorry.
Yes, it's at the end of A New Hope, the first theatrical release, right? There's the throne room scene, and it's where like Luke and Han are being presented the medals for, saving Princess Leia, right? This whole scene, there's zero dialogue from the time they enter the room all the way up to they're given the medals till they stand there on the stage, being acknowledged and smiling. There's no dialogue. So imagine filming that. The music hasn't been written yet. Remember, music comes last. Filming, everything comes first. So imagine going in thinking, I'm George Lucas, whoever's directing it, and being like, okay, so we're going to have music here. So I need you to kind of visualize, imagine what it's going to be. It's going to be some sort of like fanfare-ish, sort of celebratory music of the triumph of this story. And so they film these scenes. She's actually watching it right there. And I can actually show you this real quick, because this is actually really ties into what we're talking about. Throne room, no music. Now here's someone who tried to they kind of got funny with it. The music's been removed. They tried to remake the sound design a little bit, and they did a pretty good job. They did get stupid with Chewbacca, so it's kind of silly. But I think this is a really good example of how awkward, or how a scene completely fails without music. Completely fails without the music being there. We go here. So let's go and make sure Zoom is on the right thing too, because it always changes. Extron, good. Okay. Let's go here. Here's the scene. Oh, shoot, you're not seeing it up there. Hold on. It's got to be there. That's why there's no sound either. Okay. There it is.
Oh, yeah.
It's lights up. Okay, so the throne room scene, this is the end of the movie. The heroes have triumphed, they've saved the princess, all the classic, story arc endings, that are happy endings. Although we know the story doesn't end here, but okay. If in 1977 you thought it did, so. Here's the original music starting it. Now, normally there's a fanfare played here. It's like, but imagine that's kind of what's happening on set, right? I mean, you're filming this and you're just like, like she's smiling, like there's just,
Play the real.
that's what I was gonna do. So I'll play the original.
Oh, that's. Was the screaming of the Wookiee, that is added?
Well, no, it's a kind of deal. But the thing is, he's doing that, like that gesture was there.
Added that sound, or was that?
That sound was added as a joke. Like actually all the sound you heard was added.
Oh, I see.
So what he did is he took the scene, he just removed all the sound and he just kind of put in some sound design, like the ting, 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 ting. He did that. And then, for Chewie's voice, he just made him scream like as a joke. But yeah, so, so let's take a look here now at the original. I'm perfectly too. Section. There's your iris. There's your iris.
Okay, good.
So perfectly, the score is perfectly timed with the editing, and there's so many amazing score isms that are happening there that, that we talk about, these techniques. So well done. Doesn't it feel faster?
Yes.
It feels a lot faster, right?
It does.
The scene,
It's
the
like you don't
music's,
have it all.
because the music is just driving us. Now, you see how, I mean, this is a classic example of how music can completely make or break a scene, right?
The contour of time. You can
Right.
change the contour of time.
And you'll notice that sometimes when you're watching a film, stop and think, if I removed music here, what would this scene be like? Now, a lot of movies, it won't make a difference sometimes. Unfortunately, I mean, that's just the reality of it. But a lot of these big sci-fi fantasy movies, I'm thinking of Lord of the Rings, especially. There are so many scenes where if you remove the music, it just doesn't have even a modicum of the magic.
Matrix is an example of that. If you ever watch the movie, that dies there.
And especially scenes where there is no dialogue, like they wrote that scene thinking, or they made that scene thinking we're going to have music here. They don't know what music it is yet because it hasn't been written yet. But
Do you think there was a scratch track playing in the filming of this?
it's possible. So sometimes they will use scratch tracks on set, but they don't want to get, again, because the music has been written. They don't like composers don't like they don't want to get the directors too married to a sketch, right? A scratch. And directors do that. They fall in love with their scratch tracks, which aren't even theirs. It's from another movie or something. They're temp tracks.
Yeah.
They fall in love with those, and then it's hard for them to part with it when a composer gives them something original. And
I think in this case, this was the first episode. George Lucas said, I'm just gonna make, I don't have any music yet. I need music to get the juices flowing.
And honestly, what he was probably also thinking, I've got John Williams. He'll just make it happen, right? That's how Steven Spielberg probably did most of his movies. He's like, whatever, I can have silence here. John Williams will make it magical, and he does. But obviously not everyone's John Williams. So it's just crazy how like the importance of music. And then what does he use for this scene? Okay, let's talk about it. Now, if you saw the scene without the music and you were asked, I want you to score for this. Well, now you've kind of got an idea what John Williams did. Would any of you do it differently? Do you think the brass fanfare with the march pretty much fits that genre style? I mean, I think it does. That's why it's so famous. What do you think, Stephen?
I personally, I do like the idea of the brass fanfare. I do think, personally, again, the most Star Wars that I've actually watched were those three Star Wars.
Sure. The Skywalker series, yeah. The Skywalker saga or whatever, yeah.
Just looking at the scene, I thought that the pacing was a little off of the music. I felt like it was fast. It was a little faster than the scene carried itself.
I actually agree with you, because I feel like the march feels a little rushed, even though, but the reason is, I think the reason is because it's lining up with the editing of the film. They're trying to make the music fit the film, right? And I do feel that the march feels just a tad rushed. I agree with you. I feel like I was, especially listening to it now, I'm just like, man, they're really pushing it through to get to those credits, and just in the right exact time for them to go back to the A section or for the they had to rush it to get to that point at that exact moment. So they may have had to adjust the BPM a few clicks to make it fit. And I'll tell you, this is why when in Hollywood, we'll talk about SMPTE and composing cues with using SMPTE. This is why you have to make the music fit. And sometimes, man, you want to squeeze in these ideas and you have, and just, you got to speed it up or you got to slow it down or you got to do something to adjust. You got to change a meter. You got to shorten it, abbreviate it, abridge it. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, see, in my experience with it is you get something close when you're sketching it. And then when you want to put it onto paper, well, it has to be perfectly measured when you're putting it on paper, right? If you're just free composing, you don't have to. You just free compose, you speed up, slow down, whatever. But the professional scores, especially with orchestrators involved and whatnot, and a whole team of arrangers and engravers. They need everything to be perfectly precise. So they will use a SMPTE calculator. And we'll talk about this later, but I'll just kind of give you a brief overview, and they'll use it to figure out, okay, approximately this BPM with this meter is going to be close, but there's going to be some odd half measures, or, nothing that's going to be very, very measured cleanly for an orchestra to play. So what they'll do is most typically they'll adjust the BPM by a click or two. By moving the BPM up or down by like one click, which isn't really going to make a huge difference for most people. Going 10 clicks, yes, we'll hear that. Going one click higher or lower, you don't really notice that. But by going one click higher or faster or slower, you can have more measured, even measures for the engraving process, so that it can go on paper cleanly. And so that's why I'm guessing in this scene, I wasn't there, and we don't have access to the score, unfortunately, because John Williams donated all of his scores to the Juilliard Music School. And actually finding the original score for any film score is very difficult. You can't just buy them. You can only find like arrangements or transcriptions online. But what I think they did here is, like I said, Stephen really pointed out the obvious. I think it felt a little rushed. I think he had this idea, he sketched it out, and they're like, well, we got to speed it up by this many clicks for it to be measurable and for it to fit the editing, the length of this scene, which is probably what, 3 minutes and maybe 3 minutes. Oh, what is it? So not even a minute. Let's say it's a minute 40. So 1 minute 40, and let's say it's like 8 frames. How do I measure that, right? That's why you use SMPTE to get that perfectly measured, so that right when that iris happens, and you actually notice early on, watch this. I want you to see this. Listen to the music when it cuts to them. So it first has them walking in, right? Watch when the camera changes to from behind them, watching them walk forward. Like, listen to the music, what happens exactly in the music. Right when it cut to it, da 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 da, the theme changed even, right? That wasn't on accident. That was completely planned. So you actually notice a lot of it. That's why I said this scene is so clever for that, right? So yeah, that basically, to answer your question, yeah. Ultimately, making a couple adjustments to the BPM is usually the process that people do to make it fit and make it measurable for an orchestra to read. Now, again, I don't have an orchestra in my back pocket, so a lot of times I just compose free and make it fit. You know what I mean? And I can just easily adjust the tempo, but I'm not planning on writing it out. So who cares, right? Like, who cares if it can be written out cleanly or not? Who cares if it's quantized? To talk about later too, right? Okay, so yeah, so these are things you want to focus on when you're looking. So what I want to do today is I want to kind of look at some scenes maybe without music, and I want to look at some script without music, and I want to kind of brainstorm how we might go about scoring a scene based on what we're given, because that's the reality of it, right? These composers don't get music. Sometimes they get a temp track, but that's not enough. The directors, the composers don't get music. They won't be handed music. They'll be handed temp tracks, but they're not given like exactly what they're supposed to do. They have to look at a script. They have to talk to directors. They have to watch on screen and figure out from there. Okay. Now we've been doing this in our lessons a little bit, right? With your projects. We're in that phase right now, right? We're looking at it. We picked out some clips. The clips we've picked, why did we pick those clips? Becca, why did you pick your clip? You're coming in completely blind. And that's great. That is a great challenge, because that's going to put a lot of pressure on you as the composer to get the drama right. If you don't understand the story, you will break the film. If you don't understand the drama, like what's happening, the music will not work most of the time. Right. Yeah, yeah. And so that's why when you're watching your clips, almost you're not even thinking about music maybe at first. You're just trying to figure out what's happening, what's the motivation, what's the energy here? What are the actors like? Landon, why'd you made a film. And so you have actually intimate knowledge of that film. So you have a much bigger advantage than Becca does. Right. Especially a scene that's out of context. If you haven't seen the whole movie, that could change things with how you compose. If you just get one scene out of context, that can be tricky. And you might ruin the film if you were to add it into context and it's like randomly mixed in there. Sebastian, like you're doing Joker, right? Like you kind of understand the movie, right? You understand like what's happening, the mental breakdown, the mental health is in decline, right? And you see where he's kind of going. And it's pretty clear from your clip what's happening, right? So then your next job is once you've figured that out, the next step is to make music complement that. Now you complement, C-O-M-P-L-E, complement, not compliment. That's where you're, oh, Randall, you look nice today. That's, yeah, that's a compliment.
You like the color.
Yeah. Complement is like, almost like supplementing too. It's a similar concept where you're adding something to it to make it more whole, to make it more rich, right? Plentiful. So music has to complement the scene. Okay, so let's look at some scenes and let's even some movies, maybe, and let's see how we would score it even without music. Okay, so I'm going to show a scene. And actually, part of your challenge this week, I do have that challenge for you. I've got the clip ready to go. This is part of that challenge, is you getting a clip. Maybe you've not seen the movie, maybe you have, but the movie doesn't have music in this scene. So how would you put music to it, right? Let's go to there's so many good ones. I'm gonna watch. Let's do Castaway. I think there's some really great scenes in here. Let's go here. View these up. Okay, let's watch this scene. So, any of you seen this movie? It's from like the year 2000. Yeah, 2000. Tom Hanks is basically the sole actor. It's kind of a one-man show.
Oh, that's in volleyball.
Yeah, and Wilson. An inanimate object who actually takes on a persona, believe it or not, or is given a persona. So the story is, just give you broad strokes. He works for FedEx. He's like a manager, a big shot, and he kind of goes around and makes sure that operations are running well around the world. And there's a kind of a love story. There's a love story that's part of it, like he's engaged to someone, but he has to do one more trip, like before he can kind of settle down with her a little bit. And he takes his trip and it's over the Pacific somewhere. And the plane crashes. And this is a big cargo plane. And he's the only survivor somehow. And you watch how he does it. Robert Zemeckis movie magic, the way he just visualizes it. It's amazing. But he survives. And he ends up on a desert island. And for a very long time. But this is in the early stages of him being on that island and learning how to survive. He's just in survival mode right now. And it's amazing because there's like no score. It's so sound. They really rely on really intricate sound design. Like really in your face sound design that's very intimate and like almost like just realistic to the extreme. And so here's a scene where he's trying to build a fire. He knows he's got to eat, he's got to survive. He can't live on coconuts. So he needs to build a fire. So let's take a look at it and then be thinking about how you would score this.
Yeah, cut to it.
reminds me of the barbecue.
After many tries of failing, you finally get it. It's the first time he's kind of happy after the traumatic ordeal. Okay. So let's brainstorm here. Let's brainstorm how we might go about scoring a scene like this. It's kind of serious at first, maybe, and then it gets kind of lighthearted, right? He's kind of happy, he's triumphed. And there's one moment I think is a good opportunity for something. This scene where it cuts, there's this rhythm to where it cuts to him rubbing the fire to his face, to the fire, to his face, to the fire, to his face. It's this almost like editing rhythm. I see an opportunity for music to match that. So that's my one observation is there's an opportunity there for music rhythmically with the editing, with the pacing, if you will. So give me some ideas. What do you think? Think about all the 7 elements of a film score. Remember, style, genre, orchestration. Diegetic music's probably out the door unless it's in his head. Thematic material. It's hard to do thematic material when you've only got one scene out of context. Thematic material needs to develop and grow to be considered thematic material or to be a leitmotif because it has to come back, right? Orchestration, like I said, pacing, all these things. What do we think are some things? Yeah.
I would personally keep it, even though there's a lot of energy from the guy, I feel like I would keep it very light and almost slow. I almost picture if there's any music at all, it would be like very light strings. Maybe do it almost like maybe just like some tense chords or something. But the most energy I would add would be when the fire first comes.
Right.
And then that music without that. It's not. I feel like the whole power of this is silent.
Well, and here's the bottom line is the director chose to not have music here. He's got Alan Silvestri on this film, a legend of film scoring. But he chose not to use Alan Silvestri's talents in this scene. There's a reason why. So yes, if it's hard, this is why it's difficult because it works without music, right? This scene works well without music. But again, the challenge is to challenge you to see if we had to have, say Robert Zemeckis says, yeah, I fired Alan Silvestri. Can you come on? Can you score the scene? Okay. That's the scenario you're in. So you have to think about that. How would you do it? So yeah, I think, okay, so Stevens kind of goes with like, let's go light strings, keep it simple, keep it subtle. I tend to lean that way, certainly. What are some other approaches we could consider? I'm gonna open up something here. Slow rhythm of what? What do you think? Like what would be making the rhythm? Okay. Something sort of raw texture, you think like a drum or a metallic percussion instrument or like a keyboard mallet instrument, something like that.
As the shots and so fire gets faster and faster until finally gets fire into the instruments.
Okay. Let me just go here real quick. So Stephen, you mentioned possibly looking at, oh, what's this? It's supposed to be activated. Light strings. Why is this not working right now? It was just working. Activate. Yes, thank you. You were talking about light strings. Okay. I'm going to use some light strings here. My go-to light strings library, right? But we can find different options here. And let's just sort of, let me just go here. Make sure we're running through the right place, which we're not. Extra. Oops, thank you. That's right, apply. Apply your change. It did already. Apple reads my mind. Love it. Okay. Now, so for, yes, activate. So we're talking here is this sort of a droning string sound. So let's kind of watch it from the beginning here, and I'll kind of play that with it. I should have loaded it up in here, but. Okay.
Yeah, cut to it.
What do you think? Lower register, higher register, middle register? Keep it simple. What happens with the higher registers and lower registers, do you think?
Well, lower is just that like very dark tone.
Yeah. And high register?
It could work, but if you get too high, it seems almost like
It's, for me, the higher register starts to sound too suspenseful, too tense, right? So that's, if I go back here a little bit, I play that and I come over here. Oops, let's go here.
Yeah, cut to it.
It feels like impending doom or something, right? Totally. It brings a totally different dynamic to it. It doesn't not work. I'm just playing around here. You could have a little sprinkled in brass. So I'm playing around here. Here's where I'd want, okay, so right there, right when the fire kicks in, I don't have my keyboard here, but that's the moment where I would want something happy to shift, right? The drama shifts at that moment. He goes from like, I've been doing this for days, this is not working. And then all of a sudden he sees the smoke and it's like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And then once that flame hits, look at his face. The drama completely changes. So how would you change? If we're going from, say, these sort of suspended, these sort of suspenseful and not just kind of light strings, how do we change to, which would, I'd need a keyboard to do, but what's a good way to change that? What can you address? You read my mind. Slap in some harmony that's happy, right? Triumphant. And major chords are really good at that, right? Oh, yeah. Like if you, or even like octaves and fifths, you know what I mean? If you have like instruments playing something triumphant, but a major triad is basically as happy as it gets, right? How do I know that? Well, I'm thinking music theory. Okay. How, because my cram box of music theory things is in my head. Okay. What's happy? What colors are happy? Okay. Major triads. Okay. What are dark and sinister? Diminished triads or augmented triads, right? What, like, so I'm thinking about, that's why I'm thinking music theory. Okay. Orchestration, Stephen thought strings. Okay. Light strings. Okay, great. And maybe sprinkle in some brass, right? That'd be great, right? Especially at the triumphant moment, maybe, right? Okay. Style genre, well, classical right now, because it's acoustic classical instruments, really. I would say it's probably in the classical new wave or new age, sorry, genre. New age is a style that's like,
Now, what
It's-
is that?
like think Enya, where it's like kind of classical, kind of pop. But it's like, it's not like a Beethoven sonata or concerto or something, right? But it's using similar instruments. So those three things we've addressed. Pacing, we've talked about, it's slow, right? The pacing is slow, it's drawn out, there's not a lot of action happening, you're just waiting and waiting. So a sustained drone or string instrument works great to address your pacing. I think that works. I thought it worked pretty well, even when I was just noodling around, right? Diegetic music is not really a thing here, right? It's not really, and guess what? You don't have to have all 7 elements going at the same, at silence, we don't have any. We had silence, we got rid of it because we added music, right? So we've addressed silence in that we're not using it. We've addressed diegetic music in that we're not using it. It's going to be non-diegetic, if anything. Orchestration, we've chosen the instruments. Pacing, we've got that figured out. Style genre. What else? What else did I say? Thematic material, okay? Not really apply here. Doesn't really apply yet, but it could. Music theory-wise, we've discovered that, we're kind of using single pitches until we get to that triumphant moment where we might use a major triad, okay? So we're addressing all of those elements, all 7 pretty much at the same time. And that's the best way to think about when you go about this process, okay? Be thinking about all those elements, how to address them, or if they apply or not in any situation, because sometimes they just don't. And how can you use them to their best, right? So making decisions. So the music theory one, you're all music students. I'm sure most of you have a pretty good theory background, right? We feel pretty good about our theory. That's the one element we haven't really dived into yet, which we'll do a little bit more because we're going to look at more scores. But if you're thinking about music theory, for me, I think of it as a crayon box. I've told you this, Landon. I've mentioned this before. The crayon box. The more you know, the more colors you get to choose from. The less you know, well, you might get some primary color, 12-pack, primary colors that are, good. And you can do a lot with those. But I want that bucket with the sharpener on the side, like I want that big bucket of all these colors I've never even heard of. And I want to be able to pull from that, right? I want to be able to look at that, and knowing more theory allows you to do that. Yeah.
Basically, what would you do? Would you make these choices if you were to score this?
So I would be thinking about those elements, and would I make these same choices? Probably not. I might sketch this.
What would you do?
I might start sketching this way. My first sketch might be sort of like along this line, but then I actually might consider string pizzicato. I'm thinking like doom, ding, doom, ding, doom, ding, doom, ding. Something that's like you're waiting, you're kind of, because it's still early on in the film, relatively.
What do you think his emotion is during the scene at the beginning?
The beginning, he's just like exhausted,
And right.
but also it's also mysterious because like it's like he's still like in mystery mode. Like I'm on this deserted island. He's still in the first couple weeks of being there.
If you've been there a couple of weeks on an island,
Yeah,
no fire.
no fire.
I think you're starting to freak out a little.
I think he's actually at this point, my opinion is he's starting to settle in.
Routinized.
He's starting to settle into the routine of he's accepted, okay, I'm stuck here. I need to make fire if I'm going to live. Right. So when I think of that, that means it kind of gets lighter for me. It's a little less heavy.
Yeah, I would start, if I were to do this, I would use something very light percussion,
Yeah.
almost click sounds. And I've used a flute, just blowing into flutes, very soft, and maybe even whistling a little, giving a little whistle.
Yeah.
But very high harmonics, very, very thin. And I think no sound works great.
Yeah.
No sound works.
Yeah.
great.
I mean, this is one of those movies where it was designed knowing that they weren't going to have a lot of music, and they did it on purpose. So that's why it works. Right. But not every film can do that. And some films are saved by the music. A lot of films are saved by the music. But yeah, so that's just an example of there's not one way to do it. Randall's got a way. I've got a way. Steven's got a way. We've all got a way that we would do this. The important thing is going through the process and knowing what you want to do and being confident with your choices. Okay. And to be confident with your choices, you have to understand this craft really well.
And what I would do in this case, the opposite of what you were doing, taking the orchestration genre, I would start looking at what happens when. What happens
Mhm.
when and what's the emotion, what's the
Yep.
contour of the shape of the time. So it's slow, it's very slow, and then all of a sudden it starts picking up.
And a triumph, yeah.
And as it starts picking up, the time passes slower.
Yeah.
Ironically, you can
Yeah.
have silence and he's rubbing sticks and it can be the same amount of time as the fire is on. But
Mhm.
I have a lot more music going on in that and it feels much faster.
Yeah.
Because we're starting to hear some sort of rhythmic repetition, sort of starting to make it time pass quicker.
Yeah.
Even though and so it's over in our own memory of it,
Mhm.
but it may be 60% of the whole clip. I don't know what point is this on this clip? It is 1:11, is that right? 1:12?
Where the triumph, around 110, yeah, or so where
110.
the,
So it's about halfway through. We don't have any fire and then we have fire.
Yeah.
So, and I think from there on, it's about the same amount of time.
are you talking about in the movie as a whole?
Yeah.
Oh, in the
No,
movie,
no, I mean, just this clip.
oh, yeah, just,
Just
yeah,
this clip.
Yeah.
It's about 50% of the time.
Yeah.
That we have fire.
Yeah.
But it takes, to me, it takes 20% of the time. Because time is moving, but
Yeah.
things are happening and he's dancing, he's
Yeah.
doing things.
Yeah.
So I think trying to get a sense of that is another way. And I think for my composers today, Stephen, Becca, and Kevin, your idea was to go through and do timings, which is, and getting a sense of timing. This is, we didn't start with orchestration at all. We didn't talk about genre at all, I don't think. We did talk about genre, but it was, I think it's important for us to know the different ways, different methodologies.
and I believe you got presented on orchestrating as composing in the past.
Yeah,
I think a lot of times that is what drives our
Yeah.
film scores,
oh, yeah.
because we're working with a virtual instrument of some kind. And we're like, wow, okay, this is interesting how they do this. For example, this one I'm using, if I switch, there's this option, it's called chamber evolutions. It's a string, it's like a string quartet basically. And they're doing it's basically, but it's played like drones, right? It just continues, but it evolves and it has little fragments of different varieties of things that happen, events. And so if I put on this randomize with dissonance, okay, and I play that same thing pretty much. If I hold down a string, listen to what happens as it plays. If it's playing, it's not playing. Hold on. Gosh, don't you love just
Back down.
hold on. Let me minimize this, open up Logic. Go back here. Oh, it's frozen. Oh, there we go. Okay, got it. Hold on, let me go back to here. It's a really great string library. It finally signed me in, by the way.
Contact, yeah.
I'm not sure what's happening here. Let me restart Logic. I don't know what's happening. It was just working. You all saw it.
Yeah.
I didn't change anything.
No, it's frozen.
And that's pretty rare. Okay. I will say tech gets murky when you have Zoom in the mix. Especially you're trying to set audio to a certain place and send it also through other video conferencing situations. Go here, make a track, contact. I activated it already. Well, I don't know why it's doing that today. Yeah, because all my libraries are missing right now. Okay, so now I'm going to put it on randomize with dissonance. So listen to what a library like this will do. And this is something to consider where orchestration is driving my composition because what this instrument is capable of. So you hear this. It's doing these little bends, right? And they're at random. No, it'll be whatever it was but as you're playing it, it evolves constantly. So I'll play it low. Cellos and basses, most likely. And here it's got this little character to it. And I'm thinking, wow, this is great for like, this might be great for a scene where it's kind of suspenseful. It's not totally easy, or it's a little uneasy, but maybe not like so like crazy action on the screen, lots of things happening. I think Hitchcock straight up when I hear these, and then like this one is like,
There are birds up there.
The birds are making us-
and Landon, this right here is what I can see your movie having.
Yeah.
Stormbound, right here, especially we talked about this, possibly like when the person's going to the shower and finds the sister or whatever, like, yeah, sees herself, yeah,
The woman walking in the water before him.
and so this is where orchestration drives the composition. And so by having a bunch of virtual instruments and big massive cram box of instruments, it's kind of leading me to like, wow, okay, this could work here.
Yeah.
So it's not always just sitting at a piano, because a piano is a homogeneous instrument, meaning like the timbre is the same pretty much. It's got a full range. But if you're playing something on the piano and you're like in a certain range that works good for woodwinds, but when you actually have woodwinds play there, it's going to be a totally different sound, right? So it's going to be playing around, but sometimes orchestration drives it. Any other thoughts on Castaway? On how you might score it?
There's one thing about storytelling and working off a script or a storyboard that I would suggest that you look at. Could you while you're on this computer, look for Save the Cat scripts?
Save the Cat scripts.
Save the Cat scripts. It's on, yeah. There's a book available, and a lot of screenwriters use this called Save the Cat. And it's about the process of writing a story and analyzing a story. And I would recommend this book in general. I'm writing a piece right now using Save the Cat, and it helps me find the architecture, discover the architecture in creating a script and also analyzing scripts. And Save the Cat is the name of the, I don't know what that is.
Something else.
Save the Cat. Here we go. Last book on screenwriting. That's it. Go down, go down, go down. There we go.
Right here,
Well,
books.
Save the Cat writes for TV. Save the Cat write a young adult novel. Save the Cat beat sheet workbook. And it talks about how to break down a story in beats. So you basically look at any of your examples in your films, and this happens. And then you analyze that beat. And the beat, is sort of breaking down the story in form of beats. They call it beats. And you create a list of beats throughout the story. In the case of Kevin's story, there's a couple of beats in your story where, first of all, she's going up to the moon with her dad in an imaginary box, and then she gets older, and it's almost telling the story in little chunks all the way through, and each of those is a beat. And during your movie, it goes to black, it fades to black once. I know Stephen's book story, it fades to white, I think.
Black.
It goes to black. But you look at they're creating a story in a series of beats. So what I'm looking at here is storytelling, working up a script or storyboard. One of the ways to do that is this book called Save the Cat. And
Awesome.
Samples of the book online, you can check it out for yourselves. Save the Cat.
Awesome.
And it's a lot of screenwriters are using it, and they're now doing spin-offs of Save the Cat. Save the Cat, write an young adult book, and Save the Cat storytelling, and Save the Cat movie scripts, and Save the Cat TV scripts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at you were talking about generating looking at working off of the script.
Working off of a script.
The other way, yeah, there you go.
This is
Death Trap.
This is Death Trap. This is a play from the 70s. This is one I recently did, actually. I scored for. And, you know, I have to read the whole script. My first step is I have to read the script. And I don't do it thinking of music even. I just read the script, like to try to absorb the story. Okay. And then as I finish the story and once I've got the big picture, then the music kind of comes to me at that point. I'm like, oh, okay. So I see how this started, where the tension was created and where it resolved. Now I'll give you this real quick. Okay. Most movies, stories, scripts have what's called the 3-act structure. Okay. The 3-act structure, an A act, a B act, and a C act, A, B, C. And throughout your standard formula, so you have this sort of grid, okay? This vertical one is time. So beginning of movie to the end of the movie. Okay. This is tension or drama or some sort of problem or something, right? So as time goes, and so let's break it down here. Let's go A, let's go B, let's go C. Act A, B, and C in time, okay? Typically, it starts like this. Movie begins. There's not a lot of tension. You're being introduced to characters. They're setting things up. You're learning about the narrative world. You're learning about how it all works and what's going on, okay? Then tension begins. There's a problem. There's something that's happening that's the whole point of the story, right? Something that it's usually a problem or something they have to solve or fix. It could be a relationship. It could be, they're on the rocks and, they need to figure it out. It could be a villain. We jump to a villain and as he's building his army, there's all kinds of ways that a problem is built, okay? And the problem continues and the intensity continues to grow as we're in the, well into the B act, okay? The B act is the longest part between B and C. This is actually the longest part of the film. The A is introducing it. And then the C part, the last act, is literally like this. So tension begins, it builds up through the B act, and then usually in the last 10 minutes of most films, 5 or 10 minutes, complete resolution. The villain's been defeated, the relationship's been mended. And so this is kind of how you want to think about music too, when you're doing a whole score or a whole film. This is the tension meter. And this is like 90% of stories. Okay. So now out of context, it's tough because what if you're given a chunk? I need you to score the film. And it's like here to here. And that's kind of what Castaway was there. It's kind of like into the B. It's well into the B here, but we're not fully here. We're somewhere like around here. So it's like, is it still light? Is it tense? Like, what is it? You know what I mean? That's a tricky one there. And then like that follows the classic formula too, because the second he gets on the raft that he makes out of trees and stuff, and then he gets over the big wave, and then he's just like on the ocean for a while, and he's starving, but then the tension is completely released the second that freighter boat finds him, that freighter ship finds him. And it's like, he's saved. Okay, so this is a play. It's kind of there's a twist. It's kind of dark. It's about this screenwriter, this playwright, I should say. He's a playwright. He's writing plays, and he's well known for it. And he's got this female with him, but he's a fraud. I believe reading it is that he's never actually written. He's stolen from a bunch of people, and every time he's stolen from them, he's murdered them. So he's a playwright who has basically lured in other playwrights who wrote brilliant stories. He murders them and then takes the credit for the story. Right. And so this is him, and he's got this woman who's his sort of just companion. And she's kind of in on it too, but she's kind of oblivious to it. Anyways, there's 3 people in this whole play, basically. Anyways, so it goes on, and he finds this young playwright who wrote something, who attended one of his seminars, And the young playwright worships him, basically. He thinks he's the greatest playwright ever and sends him a script. And the guy loves it. So what's his plan? Lure him to his place and murder him, right? And then take the credit for the script. But there's a twist in this one where the young playwright is they're actually homosexuals, and they're in love with each other, and they trick the female into having a heart attack. It gets complicated. She has a heart attack because they fake this murder of the young playwright. They fake it, but then he's still alive, and then she gets so upset when he comes back to life that she has a heart attack. And then they're like, sweet, okay. And then they start to work on the play together. And then what happens is they start to quabble over the play and how things should go and how it's kind of revealing of the murder that he committed. Like it's kind of tying into the story. And so they decide to try to kill each other again. And well, they all die. We'll just say that. Okay. It's pretty funny, but it's dark. It's kind of a dark comedy. Dark comedies can be very tricky. What is the hardest genre to write music for? Comedy. I say this all the time, unless it's like Looney Tunes. Okay. Have you guys heard the term Mickey Mousing? So Mickey Mousing is a term that gets used. It's actually kind of a negative term in terms of from composer's standpoint. Mickey Mousing is like the old Looney Tunes where like the everything that happened on the screen, the music matched it like to almost too much, right? Like every time someone gets hit or runs, the music is matching it almost too much. And almost to the point where it's obnoxious, right? It's cartoony. It's Mickey Mousing. That's why hence the term Mickey Mousing. And so a lot of them see it as a negative score practice, a negative technique, because you don't want to be Mickey Mousing every single thing that happens. You want subtlety and sophistication and mystery. And so with this one, so thinking about the story I just sort of laid out for you, I'll play some of the music. Let's see if I can play some of the music that I composed.
For Death Trap?
Yes, for Death Trap. Now, how do I know? Everything I just said to you, though, was because I read the script. I'm like, okay, so I'm thinking, okay, so it starts out, it's really kind of like, it's the playwright, kind of, just like, you don't know that he's a murderer necessarily right away, but you're just kind of learning about that. And then there's obviously these murder scenes, these fight scenes at the end. So it kind of like grows in a tension. And so let's see here. I can't even remember what I did this. This is one I did recently. Let's see. So some of the scenes, it's like, you're just kind of like the characters are kind of not sure what's going on. They're kind of wandering around, figuring stuff out, like curiosity. And this is the kind of music I did for like curiosity. Sounds weird in these speakers, but yeah.
I'll have to put this play up to my basement. Won't tell you.
Okay. So this is underscored. This is all underscored, and this is during when like the young playwright comes to visit, and he doesn't know he's a murderer, but he's just kind of like curious, like something's wrong, something's odd, right? And so what did I use there? What did I use for this like sort of unsure, but not too heavy yet, but like kind of like curious, playful curiosity? What did I use? I mentioned this before. String pizzicato. I have like the low strings doing sort of a boom, 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 1, 5, 1. And then I have this sort of upbeat with the strings going boom, cling, boom, cling, boom. And then I threw in the little ding, as in you figure out something, you're noticing something, like I think the movie Clue or something like that, where it's like, yeah, or someone's just like wandering around trying to figure stuff out, kind of a mystery, but it's not too heavy yet. What's that? Oh, clink, ding. It does have Yeah, typewriter has a very specific rhythm. Yeah, and then the cling, then you gotta have a. That's very good. So that's what I did for that kind of motivation, and they said it worked really well. I've never seen the play. I've read the script. I've never, in fact, I've now scored over 25 plays that I have never seen. Like not once, not seen a single second of it on stage. But so I go off what they say in critical reviews. This one did get reviewed though by the critics in the what is it, Columbus, Ohio, where this company is. And they gave rave reviews about the music and everything. So I was like, hey, I'll take it. There's some variations on that that happen throughout. But let's see here. This Roach's one. So string pizzicato is a heavy part of this whole score. And lots of space. Just this, that's it. You know, keep it simple. I sneak in a little bass clarinet. Little growl. I'm not reinventing the wheel. Okay. I'm keeping it simple and I'm doing what the music should do. Serve the scene. Don't step on the drama. Don't step on the dialogue. Don't overstep your bounds, right? Your job is, and I will tell you a lot about this job, and Randall knows this too. There's a lot of repetition in the music. There's a lot of kind of loop-based kind of repetition, and that's just how it is. Some scenes you have to do it. Some scenes you can go wild, you know?
It's like literally a accompanying song. I mean, you can't overdo the orchestration, the accompaniment to the extent you can understand the words. So it's very much the same idea about setting songs. You don't want to have the accompaniment be so busy, so thick that you can't hear it. And so being clear. One thing I just want to say, because we're coming up to 2:20, I put up, besides the link to a place on Save the Cat, a couple of steps just so you can further study if you want to look into it. It talks about how to look at your scene, your clip, or whatever that is, the percentages and how you go through the percentages. It talks about some of the things you might think of as you're looking at your own clip. Doesn't have to be the whole clip, but it start thinking in terms of larger chunks and then timing them out. And because you've got film, it's got to be timed.
Yeah.
It's got to be timed. I don't want to delay. I don't want to step on.
Oh, no.
But I just think that it's helpful now that we're about almost 2:20, just to take a look at this. And I want to keep this up here. If you want to download it, or can you download this from Zoom? I'll put it up on Zoom here in a short while, though. I'll stick around here.
Yeah.
While I'm going to be uploading the first session. If that's okay.
Just real quick on that lap play.
Yeah.
Here's where I kind of like got to do what I wanted to do a little bit more. Okay. This is sort of the main theme, the opening curtain before you even see actors on stage. Speakers are weird. just to really set up the action, you know? Give it some life. They sound, these speakers really suck, by the way. Wow. It makes it sound all, the EQ in them is really poor. And so you'll learn, even with the best brass libraries, the best brass libraries just don't sound great. We're talking about this, Landon, I think like blending brass is so crucial with virtual instruments because they just aren't there yet. But yeah, just setting it up, kind of action. I was thinking the movie Cape Fear. If you've ever seen the movie Cape Fear, Scorsese movie, bum, 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 bum. This like big brassing, and like the director even mentioned Cape Fear. So I kind of like, okay, big brass, menacing, growling brass with like this sort of, you know, string sort of driving rhythmic pattern. And what was it, 5/8, 7/8? Okay. Any questions? Gosh, there's so much we could do more here. We could talk about this literally all day.
Or like a semester.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's so many examples out there. We've just scratched the surface. There's so many examples. There's so many techniques. There's so many opinions and approaches that you can take. Okay. Now, I'm not worried about that. I think you guys you're here, you have good imaginations, and you have a pretty solid music background, all of you. You all do, actually, every single person in this room. So that's great. But sometimes when you're in this field, you can't write concert music all the time. Concert music, you can do whatever the hell you want. Okay? You can do whatever you want when you're writing concert music. Tim, we talked about that, I think, right? There's no rules. Like, you do what you want. With film music, there's parameters, there's boundaries, there's rules. So it makes it even more challenging in a way because you have to write creative music within boundaries. And some people, I believe, who was it? The teacher last week?
Rob Jacobs, Brandon.
Yes. And this is something I always say too, is that working with fewer resources and within boundaries actually forces you to be more creative. Right? Again, could I have scored that with like full orchestra and choir? I could have, but I was like, oh God, I did everyone. By the way, I wrote that cue in less than an hour. Because sometimes it's just like, I gotta get this out. I have a deadline, just got to do it. And sometimes you have to settle for stuff that isn't perfect or that you don't love. But that's the nature of it. If you're doing a Hollywood film, yeah, you're going to get a whole month to write the music and you're going to spend 24/7 doing it. And you're going to be very meticulous and it's going to be amazing. But when you're scoring something that, you know, mid-level or less, sometimes just get it done. Just get her done and move on. I can't even remember writing this. Like, this was just a couple weeks ago.
Could you save give me the host duties instead of pass it back to me?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm saving this session. And if you could either load up on the tutorial on the YouTube, the first session today, or I will do it if you give it to me.
Let's see here.
On Google Drive.
Assign Randall.